My husband Arthur died a saint. Everyone said so. But the key I found in his desk didn't lead to heaven. It led to a storage unit. And inside, decades of lies. They thought a 68-year-old widow was harmless. They were dead wrong. Hey there. If you love a story about secrets and payback, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss where this road goes. My name is Beatrice, but most folks just call me B. I'm 68 years old, and for the last 40 of those years, I was Mrs. Arthur Pennington. Being Mrs. Pennington wasn't just a title. It was a full-time unpaid job, and last month my employer finally kicked the bucket. The funeral was, as Arthur would have wanted, immaculate. The lilies were white, the casket was mahogany, and the procession of mourners was long. Our son, Gregory, gave a eulogy that didn't leave a dry eye in the church. He spoke of his father's integrity, his business acumen in the real estate game, his charity work. A pillar of the community, the mayor called him, patting my shoulder with a clammy hand. I sat in the front pew, veiled and silent, playing the part I had perfected over 4 decades. The supportive, quiet, grieving widow. And I was grieving, I suppose. But not for the man everyone else was eulogizing. I was grieving the life I'd never had. The woman I'd never been allowed to become. You see, Arthur didn't just provide for me, he curated me. He was the kind of man who didn't shout. He suggested, "Bee, darling, don't you think the blue dress is more appropriate for the club dinner? Bee, honey, let me handle the investments. No need to trouble your pretty little head with numbers." My whole life was a series of his suggestions. Our house, my car, my friends, even my hobbies, all approved by Arthur. He wasn't a monster. He was worse. He was a velvet-gloved tyrant. He smothered me with comfort, insulating me from the world until I was nothing but a high-end porcelain doll, sitting on a shelf of his perfect beige life. He handled the whole 9 yards of our finances, our plans, our future. All I had to do was host dinners and smile. The weeks after the funeral were a blur of casseroles, sympathy cards, and lawyers. Gregory, who is Arthur in miniature, was already taking charge. "Don't worry, Mom," he said, just like his father. "I'll get Dad's affairs in order. You just rest," but I didn't want to rest. For the first time in my life, there was no one in the house telling me what to do. The silence was vast and strange. It wasn't the empty, sad silence that my friend Delia described after her husband passed. This was an open window kind of silence. A silence that held possibilities. It was on a Tuesday, while Gregory was at the law office sorting out the estate, that I finally went into Arthur's study. It was the one room in the house that was truly his. It smelled of old leather, wood polish, and something faintly acidic, like old paper. I'd always hated it. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was just touching his things. The heavy crystal paperweight, the gold-plated pen set, the leather-bound books he'd never read. I ran my hand along the underside of his massive mahogany desk, a nervous habit, when my fingers snagged on something. Tape. I knelt, my old knees cracking in protest. Taped to the bottom of the center drawer, tucked way in the back, was a small manila envelope. My heart didn't pound. It just stopped. It went cold. This was not Arthur's style. Arthur was meticulous. He had a safe. He had filing cabinets. He did not tape things under desks like some kid hiding a dirty magazine. I pulled the envelope free. Inside was a single key, a cheap silver key on a faded red plastic tag. The tag had 3 things written on it in faded marker. Lock It Up Self-Storage, an address across town, and the number 31B. I stood there staring at it. Lock It Up. I knew the place. You see it from the highway, a janky-looking sprawl of corrugated metal doors in the industrial part of town. The kind of place you pay for in cash and they don't ask questions. Why would Arthur Pennington, Mr. Pillar of the community, have a storage unit in a place like that? We had a 3-car garage, a finished attic, and a custom-built shed in the backyard. If he had old tax documents, he'd have them professionally archived. The old bee, the one Arthur had built, would have called Gregory. She would have said, "Honey, I found this strange key. Can you please look into it?" She would have handed it over, troubled her pretty little head no more, and gone back to her gardening. I looked at the key. I looked at the door of the study, and I slipped the key into the pocket of my cardigan. I didn't even change my clothes. I grabbed my purse, got into the Lexus he'd picked for me, and drove. The GPS, a system I barely knew how to use, guided me away from the manicured lawns and quiet streets of my neighborhood. It took me across the river, past the factories, to the part of town where the pawn shops and rundown diners lived. The whole drive, my mind was blank. It was like I was floating, watching myself do this. I wasn't scared. I wasn't sad. I was awake. I hadn't felt this awake in years. Lock-it-up self-storage was even grimier up close. A chain-link fence topped with barbed wire surrounded rows and rows of identical, rusted orange doors. There was a sleepy-looking guy in the front office who barely glanced at me when I said I was just visiting my unit. He buzzed me through the gate. I found row 300. The air smelled like old tires and dust. My sensible heels crunched on the gravel. Boy, 3B, I stood in front of the door for a long minute. The lock was a heavy, old-school padlock, caked in rust. This was it. This was the one thing in my 40-year marriage that Arthur hadn't curated, hadn't controlled. This was his, and his alone. I put the key in. It was stiff, but it turned. The lock clicked open. I pulled it off, my hand shaking just a little. The heavy metal door was low. I grabbed the handle and pulled up. It screamed, a horrible, grinding shriek of metal on metal that echoed in the silence of the complex. The door rolled up, revealing the dark, musty space inside. I fumbled for a light switch, finding a single bare bulb on a pull chain just inside the door. I pulled it. The dim yellow light flickered on, illuminating the space. It wasn't for storage. It was an office. A cheap particle board desk sat against one wall. A stained armchair was in the corner. There was a mini fridge humming quietly, but it was the wall opposite the desk that made the air leave my lungs. It was a corkboard. A massive one, and it was covered end to end with photographs. They weren't pictures of me, or Gregory, or our home. They were pictures of another woman. A woman with dark hair, maybe 20 years younger than me, and a boy. A teenage boy, laughing, holding a baseball trophy. There were pictures of them at a beach. A picture of them in front of a Christmas tree. A picture of the woman and Arthur. My Arthur, kissing. His arms wrapped around her like I'd never seen him hold anyone. On the desk, beneath the corkboard, was a stack of papers. I picked up the top one. It was a bank statement, a checking account I'd never heard of. It was a joint account in the names of Arthur Pennington and Camila Rojas. The balance had 6 figures. My piggy bank, the one Arthur so generously topped off for my little expenses, had $1,500 in it. I stood there in the cold, dusty light of that secret room, looking at the life my husband had lived while I was busy being the perfect stupid doll. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt the last 40 years of my life collapse into a pile of ash at my feet. Arthur wasn't just a meticulous husband. He was a meticulous monster, and I, Beatrice Pennington, was the biggest fool in the entire state. But as I stood there, looking at the face of the woman who had gotten the man I never knew, something new and hot and hard settled in my chest. It wasn't grief, it was rage, and it was crystal clear. I pulled the chain on the light, plunging the room back into darkness. The sound of the rolling door screaming shut was like a coffin lid closing, not on Arthur, but on the woman I had been. I fumbled with the rusty padlock, my hands finally shaking, not with fear, but with an icy electric current. I got back in the Lexus, the smell of new leather and my faint floral perfume warring with the musty metallic scent clinging to my clothes from that damnable unit. I sat there for a long minute in the gravel lot, surrounded by other people's secrets. And I did something I hadn't done in that car, or any car Arthur had bought me. I used the Bluetooth. I called my son. Mom, is everything okay? Gregory's voice was sharp, professional. He was already the man of the house. Yes, darling, I said. My voice as smooth and placid as a lake, the voice of the porcelain doll. I was feeling a bit cooped up. Decided to go for a drive. Don't wait up for me. A drive? Where? The polite suspicion, just like his father's. Just revisiting some old places, dear. Down by the old waterfront. You know, remembering. It was the perfect excuse. Grief makes you do crazy things. Oh, okay, Mom, just be careful. The lawyers called again about the probate court filing. I handled it. Thank you, Gregory. You're a good son. I hung up. I put the car in gear and drove out of Lock It Up, the lies tasting like battery acid on my tongue. I had lied, easily, fluently. It was terrifyingly simple. I'd been practicing for 40 years, after all. Every time I'd said, "Yes, Arthur, that's a wonderful idea." The drive home was a revelation. Every street lamp, every manicured lawn in my neighborhood looked fake. It was a stage. A multi-million-dollar set for a play where I was the only actor who didn't know the plot. When I pulled into my own driveway, the house, the grand, beige colonial Arthur had been so proud of, looked like a mausoleum. I walked in, dropped my keys in the ceramic bowl, a wedding gift from an aunt long dead, and went straight upstairs. Not to Arthur's study, to my closet. Tucked in the back, behind my winter coats, was an old floral print hat box from a store that hadn't existed in 30 years. Inside was my mother's jewelry and my old nursing school graduation photo. I was smiling in that photo, a real, gap-toothed 20-year-old smile. I hadn't seen that girl in decades. I put the key, the statement, and the pictures I'd taken with my phone inside the box, under the velvet lining. They would be safe there. Arthur never went in my closet. He just bought things to fill it. The rest of the day, I performed my role. I watered the plants. I returned a call to the church's sympathy committee. I made myself a small, sensible dinner of poached salmon and asparagus. But while my hands were busy, my mind was running. Camila Rojas. Leo Rojas. Coastal Trust Bank. Arthur was meticulous. He wouldn't just have an affair. He would structure it. He would fund it. He would protect it like one of his prized real estate deals. And that 6-figure bank account? That wasn't just go-away money. That was a nest egg he'd built while telling me we had to tighten our belts last year, when I'd asked for a new patio set. I slept in the guest room that night. I couldn't bear the smell of his pillows. The next morning, I dressed in what I called my running errands outfit. Sensible slacks, a silk blouse, my good walking shoes. I looked every bit the respectable widow. But first, I went to a 7-Eleven on the other side of town and bought a $90 prepaid Go phone with cash. The kid behind the counter had more metal in his face than a hardware store and didn't even look at me. I was just some old lady, invisible. It was perfect. I drove to the public library. I hadn't been there in years. I sat at a public computer terminal, the sticky keys clicking under my fingers. I didn't search for private investigator. That was too TV. I searched for discrete asset and liability inquiries. I found a firm. Thorn Protective Services. It sounded solid, boring, expensive. Good. I took my new untraceable phone to the library's quiet garden and made the call. A crisp female voice answered. I gave no name. I need to speak with someone about a potential discrepancy in a family estate. It requires absolute discretion. An appointment was set for 2 p.m. at a coffee shop in a strip mall I'd never heard of. Mr. Thorne was not what I expected. He was young, maybe 40, wore a well-tailored suit, and had the calm, bored eyes of a man who had seen everything. He looked more like one of Gregory's lawyer buddies than a PI Mrs. He started, sitting down across from me. Call me Beatrice, I said, opening my purse. I hadn't brought the phone. I'd printed the photos at a drugstore kiosk. I slid the grainy pictures of Arthur and her and the boy across the table, along with the bank account number I'd memorized. He glanced at them, his expression unchanged. The man is your husband? He passed away last month. My condolences. And the woman and the boy, I have no idea. That's what I'm paying you to find out. I want everything. Her name, her address, her job, her social security number, her shoe size. I want to know who the boy is. And that bank account? I want to know where the money came from. And I want to know where it's going. Thorne looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time. The boredom was gone. In its place was a flicker of respect. This is an asset investigation, he said. It's $500 a day plus expenses. I'll need a $2,000 retainer, in cash. I'd already stopped at my bank. I slid a plain white envelope across the table. That's $3,000. Consider the extra a bonus for speed. He took the envelope without counting it. You're not the typical grieving widow, Beatrice. I'm not grieving, Mr. Thorne, I said, picking up my purse. I'm auditing. I I left him there and drove straight to the Pennington Realty main office. Gregory was in Arthur's big shot corner office on the phone, already sounding stressed. He waved me in, covering the receiver. "Mom, hey. You okay?" "Just fine, darling. I was looking for that old photo of your father at the 98 Realtors Gala. I thought I'd have it framed." "Oh yeah, sure. I think those old files are in the archive room. Ask Janet, she'll let you in." He was already back to his call. "Look, I don't care what the zoning board said. Janet, Arthur's secretary for 30 years, a woman who wore the same beige pantsuits as me, let me into the windowless archive room. Take all the time you need, Mrs. Pennington." I didn't look for photos. I went straight to the vendor file cabinets. CR catering? No CR maintenance? No. I pulled open the consultant's drawer. And there it was. Rojas C. It wasn't a thin file. It was a thick one. I opened it. The first invoice was dated 19 years ago. Consulting fee. Property zoning analysis. $10,000. The next month, another one. And the next, for 19 years, Arthur had been paying C. Rojas a monthly consulting fee that ranged from $10,000 to $15,000. I did the math in my head, my nursing school brain still sharp. It was over $3 million. He hadn't just kept her. He hadn't just set her up. He had funneled our company, my company, Gregory's inheritance, directly into her pocket. This wasn't just an affair. This was grand larceny. This was a long con. I stood there in the cold, fluorescent-lit room holding the proof. The rage I'd felt in the storage unit was a campfire. This was a forest fire. I was photocopying the entire file when my little burner phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Thorne," it said. "Got a hit. Camila Rojas. She's not just a girlfriend, Beatrice. She's on the payroll, and you're not going to believe who she is." My fingers didn't tremble. I calmly pressed the green start button on the copier one last time, the whirring sound and the smell of hot toner filling the small room. "You're not going to believe who she is." The text glowed in my pocket, a little beacon of damnation. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. The final sheet slid into the tray. I collated the stack of invoices, the evidence of Arthur's 19-year-long heist, and slipped it into my oversized purse. I spent another 10 minutes shuffling through the gala box, just in case Janet, or God forbid Gregory, decided to check on me. I finally pulled out a grainy 8-10 of Arthur, his arms slung around the mayor, both of them holding cigars and grinning like Cheshire cats. It was perfect. I was the doting widow, lost in nostalgia. I walked out of the archive room holding the photo. "Found it," I announced to Janet, giving her the full, watery-eyed, "Isn't it wonderful to remember" smile. Janet put her hand on my arm. "Oh, Mrs. Pennington, he was such a good man. It's lovely you're doing this." "He was one of a kind," I said, the words feeling like gravel in my mouth. "Thank you for your help, dear." I walked through the lobby of Pennington Realty, past the large gold leaf P on the wall that I had helped design. My heels clicked on the marble, a steady, unhurried rhythm. I was a ghost in my own life. I got to the Lexus, my hands steady on the wheel, and drove 2 blocks away to a small public park. I parked under a large oak tree, the burner phone feeling heavy and hot in my hand. I dialed Thorne. He picked up on the first ring. "Beatrice. On the payroll wasn't the surprise, Mr. Thorne. I'm standing in the archive room of my husband's company. I'm holding 19 years of fake consulting invoices to a C. Rojas. Tell me the part I'm not going to believe." There was a half-second of silence. I think I might have impressed him. "You're a fast learner," he said, his voice clipped and professional. "This isn't a phone conversation. Public library, main branch. The big atrium with the glass ceiling. 4 p.m. Find a table near the fountain." He hung up. I had 3 hours. I went home. I walked into the kitchen, the heart of the home, as Arthur used to call it, and made myself a ham sandwich on rye. I ate it slowly, piece by piece. I was methodical. I was a machine processing fuel. I felt nothing but a cold, clean hum where my heart used to be. The porcelain doll was gone. She'd been shattered in that storage unit. What was left was the rebar. At 3:45, I was sitting by the fountain reading a biography of Eleanor Roosevelt. The library was quiet. just the sound of shuffling paper and the gentle splash of water. At 4 p.m. on the dot, Thorne sat down opposite me. He didn't say hello. He slid a plain, legal-sized brown envelope onto the table. "Read it," he said, pretending to scan the room. I opened the envelope. Inside were several printed pages. The first was a corporate registration document. Rojas Realty, Inc. founder and CEO, Camila Rojas. I looked at him. "A realtor? She's a realtor?" "Not just a realtor, Beatrice," Thorne said, his voice low. "She's your husband's primary #1 competitor in the downtown commercial space. For the last decade, Rojas Realty has been the thorn in Pennington's side. They're smaller, but they're aggressive. They've underbid him on at least 6 major contracts in the last 2 years. Contracts, I'm told, that your son was banking on." The breath went out of me. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just siphoning money. It was a strategy. He complained about her, I whispered, the memory hitting me so hard I almost flinched. Arthur, at the dinner table, swirling his brandy. "That damned Rojas woman. She's a shark, no ethics. Probably undercutting the unions. He'd been acting. He was competing against himself," Thorne stated, reading my mind. He was funding his own opposition. He poured over $3 million in consulting fees into her company as seed money and working capital. He was laundering his own assets, moving them from Pennington Realty, which you and your son would inherit, to Rojas Realty, which she would. "The boy," I said, my voice flat. "The one in the pictures," Thorne nodded. He pushed another paper across the table. It was a copy of a birth certificate. Leo Rojas, 18 years old. Graduated from the very expensive, very private Crestwood Academy last May. Mother, Camila Rojas. Father. I read the name. Arthur Pennington. It was all there. The whole 19-year con. This wasn't a midlife crisis. This was a second life. A parallel life. He hadn't just cheated on me. He had built an entire replacement family, funded by my family. He was systematically dismantling his own legacy, the one Gregory was now working himself to the bone to save, and handing it over to his bastard son. The rage was so pure, so cold, it was almost serene. I finally understood. Arthur wasn't just a controlling tyrant. He was a brilliant, patient sociopath. He had played us all. Me, Gregory, his business partners, everyone. I looked at the picture of Camilla again. She was pretty, dark-haired, with a sharp, intelligent face. She wasn't just some dumb broad. She was a partner. This was a conspiracy. That 6-figure joint account I found, I asked, their day-to-day? Their vacation fund. Leo's college fund, most likely, Thorne said. The $3 million from your company was the investment. That account is the dividends. I see. I slid the papers back into the envelope. I put the envelope into my purse. I looked at Mr. Thorne, this calm, bored man who had just handed me the grenades that would blow up my entire past. This is more than I anticipated, I said truthfully. It usually is, he said. He started to get up. Sit down, I said. It wasn't a request. He paused, then slowly sat back down. The bored look was gone. He was listening. You've done excellent work, Mr. Thorne. Now I need phase 2. Phase 2? Beatrice, this is usually the part where you hand this envelope to your lawyer and let the estate battle begin. It's an open and shut case of fraud. You'll gut her. My son's name is on that company, I said, my voice like ice. The Pennington name. If this goes public, Pennington Realty is ruined. The scandal would destroy it. My son's reputation, his entire life's work, gone. Arthur's legacy would be a joke. No, I will not let that happen. So what is phase 2? He asked. You called it opposition research. I want you to dig into Rojas Realty. I don't want to know what Arthur gave her. I want to know what she did with it. I want her vulnerabilities. I want her lenders, her high-value clients, her business partners. I want to know if she cheats on her taxes. I want to know if she has any other silent partners. I want to know everything. I am not going to sue her, Mr. Thorne. I am not going to gut her. I leaned in, my voice dropping to a whisper. I'm going to dismantle her. I'm going to take back every single penny my husband stole from me and my son, and I'm going to leave her with nothing but the dust of that cheap storage unit. She built a house with my money. I'm going to repossess it, brick by brick. Thorne was silent for a full 10 seconds. He looked at me, the respectable 68-year-old widow in the silk blouse, and he saw for the first time who I really was. That, he said, will be considerably more expensive. I took my checkbook from my purse. I'm not the only one Arthur gave an allowance to, I said. I've been saving for a rainy day for 40 years. Send me the bill. But from now on, you report only to me. My son knows nothing. My lawyers know nothing. We are ghosts. Understood? Understood, Beatrice. I stood up, my biography of Eleanor Roosevelt tucked under my arm. I walked out of the library, the afternoon sun hitting my face. I got in my car, but I didn't go home. I put Rojas Realty into the GPS. It took me to a sleek glass and steel building downtown, just 3 blocks from Arthur's office. I parked across the street and just watched. Watched the young, sharp-looking agents go in and out. Watched the sold signs leaning against the wall. This was the empire my money had built. The monument to my own stupidity. A woman walked out the front door, laughing on her cell phone. Dark hair, expensive suit, sharp eyes. It was her. Camilla. She looked vibrant, successful, and utterly unaware that her world was about to end. She got into a black Mercedes convertible. I sat there, watching her drive away. The porcelain doll was in pieces. The grieving widow was a mask. And B was wide awake. And she was very, very angry. For a solid hour, I just sat there in my Lexus, across from her office. I watched the agents come and go, young, hungry, all shark smiles and expensive shoes. I watched her world, the one I'd paid for. When the anger finally receded, it didn't leave me weak. It left me cold as granite. The doll was gone, the widow was a costume, and Beatrice was a CEO. And the first order of business was to secure a new headquarters. My house was compromised. It was Arthur's stage, and Gregory was always there, his footsteps echoing his father's, his well-meaning concern a form of surveillance. I couldn't run a war from the enemy's camp. I drove back across the river, back to the grime and anonymity of lock-it-up self-storage. Unit 31BI rolled up the screaming metal door. The dim light bulb flickered on, illuminating his secret life. The corkboard with its gallery of lies, the cheap desk, the mini-fridge. I stood in the center of the room, breathing in the smell of dust and deceit. This place was perfect. It was private. It was paid up for a year. I'd found the receipts in his desk. And best of all, it was poetic justice. I was going to use Arthur's shrine to his mistress to plan her destruction. I spent the rest of the afternoon working like a woman possessed. I tore down the corkboard, ripping the smiling photos of Arthur and Camilla and their son from the wall. I didn't rip them up. I was past that kind of emotional, messy outburst. I placed them, along with the bank statements and every other personal item, into a single, neat cardboard box. I shoved that box into the darkest, most cobweb-filled corner. I would deal with it later, or maybe I'd just let it rot. I went to a hardware store, a real one, not a boutique garden center, and bought heavy-duty cleaning supplies. A folding table, a comfortable office chair, and a powerful battery-operated lantern. I scrubbed that 10x10 room until my hands were raw. I scrubbed away the smell of his cologne, her perfume, the stale air of their secrets. I set up the new table. My burner phone went on one corner. My new, cash-bought laptop, which I'd purchased at a big-box store an hour away, went in the center. By nightfall, it was no longer a shrine. It was a war room. The next morning, I put on the mask of the widow. I dressed in a tasteful charcoal gray suit, put on the pearl necklace Arthur had given me for our 30th anniversary, and went to my bank. Not the joint account Gregory managed. My bank. The one where my mother had opened my first rainy day account. Arthur knew about it, of course, but he'd always dismissed it as my little mad money. He had no idea I'd been systematically siphoning off every overage from the household budget, every cash birthday gift, every allowance check for 40 years. He'd never bothered to ask for a statement. Why would he? He was the master of finance. Mr. Henderson, the bank manager, a man who had known me since I was just B. Anderson, greeted me with a somber expression. Beatrice, my dear. I was so terribly sorry to hear about Arthur, a pillar of the community. Thank you, James, I said, giving him a sad, brave smile. He's left things in quite a state. I'm afraid I need to consolidate. Of course. Whatever you need. I need to liquidate the bonds in my personal trust. All of them. and I need to empty my safety deposit box. His eyebrows shot up, just a fraction. All of them? Beatrice, that's a significant sum. Are you sure you don't want to discuss this with Gregory, or your financial advisor? Arthur was my financial advisor, James, I said, letting a small, calculated tremor enter my voice. And Gregory has enough on his plate. I just need to feel secure. I need something tangible. The look of concern on his face melted into pity. He saw a frightened old woman flailing in the wake of her husband's death. He saw exactly what I wanted him to see. Of course, Beatrice. I understand completely. An hour later, I walked out of that bank with a cashier's check for a staggering amount, made out to a new LLC I'd had Thorne's firm create for me just yesterday, BA Holdings. My maiden initials. And in my purse, wrapped in velvet cloths, was 40 years' worth of jewelry. The pearls, the diamond tennis bracelet, the gaudy anniversary rings, all of it, gifts from a liar. They weren't memories anymore. They were assets. I would sell them to a private dealer in the city. Cash. No paper trail. My war chest was filling up. That evening, I was back in my new office. The lantern cast a bright, clear light on my clean table. My burner phone buzzed. A text from Thorne. Report ready. Same place. 30 minutes. This time, at the strip mall coffee shop, he didn't even order coffee. He sat, slid the envelope across the table, and waited. I read. Thorne was good. He was very good. He hadn't just found vulnerabilities. He'd found the jugular. Camila Rojas wasn't just a good realtor. She was a reckless one. She'd spent the last 5 years using Arthur's money, and the significant profits from her own company, to buy up distressed commercial properties downtown. She was leveraged to the hilt. She'd been betting, and betting big, on a massive downtown revitalization project that had been stalled in city council for years. And then, the payload. Rojas Realty is currently 90 days out from a balloon payment on their flagship property, the Argent Tower. The note is held by a private equity firm in New York. The sum is significant. 8 figures. Failure to pay will trigger default clauses across her entire loan portfolio. She'll be wiped out. She was expecting Arthur to cover it, I said, not looking up from the page. Or co-sign on a refinance, Thorne agreed. A refinance that, without the backing of Pennington Realty's assets, no bank will give her. She's cornered. 90 days, I mused. She was desperate. A desperate woman does desperate things. There's more, Thorne said. That revitalization project? The one she's betting the farm on? It just got a new lease on life. The city council is set to vote on the final zoning package, and the linchpin of that package is a single large contract to manage the entire commercial leasing portfolio for the new development. And let me guess, I said. The 2 finalists for that contract are Pennington Realty and Rojas Realty. Thorne nodded. The city council is announcing their decision in 60 days. If she wins that contract, she'll have the collateral and the projected income to get her loan. She'll be saved. If you win it, she's finished. I folded the paper. I finally understood the game. Arthur had been planning to let her win. He'd probably have Pennington Realty put in a weak, non-competitive bid, letting his secret empire swallow his public one. He'd been handing her his kingdom, and now, the only person standing between Camila and that contract was my son, Gregory, who had no idea he was in a knife fight with his own half-brother's mother for the survival of his company. Thank you, Mr. Thorne, I said. Your check will be at the drop point tomorrow. Keep digging. I want to know about that New York equity firm. I want to know who's on their board. I want to know what they had for breakfast. I drove to Gregory's office. I didn't call. I just showed up, playing the lonely widow. Gregory, darling, I'm so sorry to bother you. I just couldn't bear the thought of eating alone in that big house. Could I take my son to dinner? He looked exhausted. His desk was a mountain of files. Oh, Mom, I'm swamped. This city contract it's a beast. The revitalization project? I asked, all innocence. Your father used to talk about that. He always said that Rojas woman was nipping at his heels. Gregory ran his hands through his hair, just like Arthur used to. Nipping? Mom, she's trying to cut our throat. She's underbidding us at every turn. God knows where she's getting the capital to be so aggressive. It's like she doesn't even need to make a profit. I don't know how I'm going to beat her bid and still keep the lights on. I put my hand on his arm. Oh, darling, you're working too hard. Don't you worry about that woman. You're a Pennington. You'll find a way. You always do. I left him there, drowning in his father's mess. I got in my car, the mask of the doting mother melting away. I knew exactly how Camilla was being so aggressive. She wasn't trying to make a profit. She was just trying to survive. She had to win that contract, no matter the cost. I drove back to my storage unit, the cold, clean hum of rage and purpose singing in my veins. I didn't need to outbid her. I didn't need to fight her for the contract. Thorne had given me the what. Gregory had given me the when. Now, I just had to find the how. I just had to find a way to take that New York equity firm, the one holding the knife to her throat, and put my own hand on the handle. 90 days. The clock was ticking. The bright white light of the battery-powered lantern made my war room feel like an operating theater. I had the 2 timelines sketched out on a large whiteboard I'd bought. 60 days, city contract decision. 90 days, Camilla loan, default. For 2 days, I lived in that 10 by 10 box. I left only to go home, shower, change into another identical grieving widow outfit, and murmur a few sad, brave words to Gregory, who was looking more and in a word fucked. They're a nightmare. Mom, he'd said over a 10-minute dinner I'd forced him to eat. Rojas is practically giving the service away. Her bid is so low it's financial suicide. I can't match it. I can't. Dad would have known what to do. I'm sure he would have, dear, I'd said, patting his hand. Oh, you have no idea. He thought he was in a business competition. He was in a bar fight and Camilla had a broken bottle. She had to win that contract. She wasn't bidding for profit. She was bidding for her life. This was the flaw in Arthur's brilliant sociopathic plan. He had built 2 empires, but he'd made them dependent on each other, with himself as the bridge. Now the bridge was gone, and one side was about to collapse onto the other. I went back to my unit. I looked at the whiteboard. Gregory was trying to win the 60-day race. I didn't give a damn about that race. It was public, it was messy, and even if Gregory won, Camilla could still try some last-ditch legal maneuver. It left too much to chance. No, the 90-day clock. That was my clock. That was the kill switch. My burner phone buzzed. A text from Thorne. Hudson Capital Partners. It's not the firm you need to worry about. It's the man who manages their distressed asset portfolio. Name's Marcus Veltri. He's a shark. And I found his bait. Coffee shop. 1 hour. I texted back. This time, Thorne was the one waiting for me. The bored look was long gone. He looked energized, like a hound that had finally been let off the leash. Marcus Veltri, he said, not bothering with pleasantries as I sat down. He's the guy at Hudson Capital who bought Camilla's note as part of a larger, bundled-up portfolio of high-risk, high-reward commercial debt. To him, Camilla isn't a person. She's a line item. Rojas Argent 8 Fig. And he's got a problem. I waited. His bosses are leaning on him. Thorne continued, his voice low. The funds had a bad quarter. They want to clean the books before the end of the year. They want to offload their riskiest assets to show stability. Veltri is under pressure to dump any debt that looks like it might go sour. A high-leverage realtor in a competitive market who's 90 days from a balloon payment? She's at the top of his crap list. My heart, that cold, hard little stone in my chest, gave a single, solid thump. He'll be looking for a buyer then. Someone to take the note off his hands so he can close his books. He's not just looking, Thorne said, a tiny smile playing on his lips. He's desperate, but he can't look desperate, or the price plummets. He needs a quiet, fast, all-cash buyer, a vulture fund that will come in, take the toxic asset, and make his problem go away. I looked at him. He looked at me. We both knew, BA Holdings, I said. Thorne nodded. BA Holdings. A newly formed anonymous LLC with a 9-figure ready bankroll, looking to acquire distressed real estate debt. I don't have 9 figures, I said flatly. You don't need it, he countered. You just need enough to buy this note. Veltri doesn't know who BA Holdings is. He doesn't care. All he'll see is cash and a solution. He'll be so happy to get this problem off his desk. He'll likely sell it for pennies on the dollar. 70 cents on the dollar, I said, the number coming out of my mouth before I'd even thought about it. Thorne raised an eyebrow. You're feeling confident. Arthur always said never pay full price for someone else's mistake. And Camilla is a very, very expensive mistake. 70 cents is my offer. Thorne leaned back, a slow, appraising look on his face. Beatrice, this is a different game. I'm a PI, I dig up dirt. I'm not a Wall Street negotiator. No, I said, opening my purse. You're not. But you're discreet, you're smart, and you're the only person on this planet who knows the truth. This is no longer an information-gathering job, Mr. Thorne. This is an acquisition. I took out the checkbook for BA Holdings. I'd never written a check from it before. Your daily rate is an insult for this level of work, and I'm not offering you a bonus. I started writing. I filled in the pay-to line, Thorne Protective Services. I filled in the amount line, $100,000. I slid it across the table. That's your new retainer, to act as the sole managing partner and negotiator for BA Holdings. Your job is to fly to New York, meet with Marcus Veltri, and buy my husband's Mistress's debt. He looked at the check, then at me. He was calculating, and, I said, my voice dropping, when the deal is closed, when I am the one holding Camila Rojas's note, you will receive a fee. 10% of the entire note's value, not what we pay for it, what it's worth. His eyes widened. He did the math. 10% of 8 figures was a hell of a lot more than $500 a day. It was retire to a private island money. I'd learned that from Arthur, too. You don't buy loyalty, you lease it. And you always make sure your man has more to gain by succeeding than by betraying you. You're not a grieving widow, Beatrice, he whispered, his hand sliding over the check. You're a goddamned apex predator. I'm a 68-year-old woman who just learned how to use her own money. Mr. Thorne, now here's the narrative you're going to sell to Mr. Veltri. I spent the next 20 minutes laying it out. He wasn't just a random buyer. He was a savvy, opportunistic vulture who had gotten a tip. The tip? That Rojas Realty was about to lose the city revitalization contract. That their numbers were smoke and mirrors. That their primary backer, he didn't need to say it was Arthur, was gone. That the whole house of cards was coming down. BA Holdings was just swooping in to pick up the pieces before they hit the street. You make him believe he's lucky to get 70 cents on the dollar. I finished. You make him believe he's the one screwing us. Thorne stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He was a different man than the one I'd first met. He wasn't bored. He was electric. I'm on the next flight to New York. No, I said. You're not. You're going to spend 2 days creating a digital footprint for BA Holdings that Veltri's people can discover. You're going to leak a rumor in a financial chat room about a new, aggressive LLC targeting mid-level commercial debt. You're going to let him find you. Arthur always said, the best deals are the ones the other guy thinks was his idea. Thorne just stared at me. You should have been running the company, Beatrice. I am now, I said. That night I didn't go home. I stayed in my unit. I sat in my new office chair, the bare bulb replaced by the clean, bright lantern. I had my new laptop open. I was on the website for Hudson Capital Partners, reading the smirking profile of one Marcus Veltri. And then I did something new. I opened the box in the corner, the one with all the pictures. I pulled one out. It was Arthur and Camilla and Leo on a boat. They were all laughing, the sun on their faces. They looked happy. They looked like a real family. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt clear. I propped the picture up on my desk, right next to my laptop. You started this, Arthur, I whispered to his smiling, traitorous face. You built this. You built her. And now you're going to sit there and watch me take it all apart. The next 2 months were an exercise in patience. On the outside, I was the perfect grieving widow. I hosted the ladies from the church auxiliary for tea. I donated Arthur's suits, the ones I knew about anyway, to a charity drive. I listened with a pained, sympathetic ear as my son, Gregory, drove himself into the ground trying to win the unwinnable city contract. I don't get it. Mom, he fumed one night, slumped at my kitchen island, a spreadsheet glowing on his laptop. Her numbers are insane. She's not just lowballing. She's operating at a loss. It's like she has an infinite supply of cash and doesn't care if she burns it. She sounds reckless. Dear, I said, placing a plate of cookies. His favorite. Oatmeal raisin beside his hand. She is reckless, and the city council is eating it up. They see a young, aggressive, minority-owned business, and they're blinded. They don't see the house of cards. If she wins this, God, Mom, it could cripple us. I just patted his shoulder. Your father always said the truth comes out in the end. Have another cookie. While Gregory was fighting the public war, I was winning the secret one. My war room was humming. Thorne, in New York, played his part to perfection. He was the ghost, the rumor, the savvy vulture who just happened to be in the right place at the right time. He let Veltry's people discover BA Holdings. He let them initiate contact. He played hard to get. The call came to my burner phone on a rainy Tuesday. I was in my storage unit tracking the stock market on my laptop. He bit. Thorne's voice was pure adrenaline. He's terrified she's going to lose the city contract and default. He thinks he's pulling a fast one on us. He's practically begging me to take the note. What's the price? I asked, my voice calm. He wanted 85 cents. I told him he was nuts. I got him, Beatrice. I got him. What is the price? 65 cents on the dollar, Thorne said. I could hear the grin in his voice. He's faxing the paperwork now. He wants to close by Friday. Cash wire, I did the math. It was still a staggering sum. But it was less than the jewelry, the mad money, and the bonds I'd liquidated. I would have plenty left over for expenses. Then you tell Mr. Veltry he has a deal. Send me the wire instructions. BA Holdings is now in the lending business. 2 weeks later, the 60-day clock ran out. The city council announced its decision. As expected, Rojas Realty won the downtown revitalization contract. Gregory was devastated. He was at the house that night, drinking his father's expensive scotch. It's over, Mom, she won. 19 years of Dad's work, and I let this shark just take it. She'll leverage this into an empire. I failed him. I let him cry. I let him vent his rage and his grief. I held his hand and told him he was a good son, that he was more of a man than his father ever was, which was, in its own way, the goddamn truth. This isn't over, Gregory, I told him. Business goes up and down. We're Penningtons. We'll survive. He eventually went home, defeated. I went to my war room. The 90-day clock now had a new line under it. Payment due, 10 days. Camilla, of course, would be celebrating. She thought she'd won. She thought this new contract was her salvation, her ticket to legitimacy, the collateral that would let her refinance that pesky balloon payment. She had no idea that the bank she'd be calling was me. I waited. I let her enjoy it. I let her make her calls. I let her hit the wall. Thorne had, as a final stroke of genius, made the sale from Hudson Capital, ironclad non-disclosable, for 30 days. She wouldn't even know her note had been sold until she called Veltry to negotiate, and his secretary told her, I'm sorry, Ms. Rojas. We no longer service that account. The day before the payment was due, I put on my best black suit, the pearls, the sensible heels. I looked every inch the wealthy, respectable, bereaved matriarch. I drove my Lexus, not to my office, but to hers. I walked into the sleek, glass and steel lobby of Rojas Realty. It was buzzing. Young agents were laughing, high-fiving. They'd won. They were the new kings of the city. A young receptionist with bright pink hair looked up. Can I help you, ma'am? I'm here to see Ms. Rojas. Tell her it's about the Argent Tower note. The girl's smile faltered. That was a name she wasn't expecting. Do you have an appointment? No, I said. But you tell her. Beatrice Pennington is here. She'll want to see me. The name hit her like a slap. Pennington. The company they'd just gutted. She fumbled with her phone, her eyes wide. A minute later, a door opened, and she walked out. Camila Rojas. She was just like her picture, sharp, dark-haired, beautiful, and vibrating with an energy that was almost manic. She was wearing a red power dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage. Her smile was tight, confused, and deeply hostile. Mrs. Pennington, she said, I'm surprised to see you. If this is about the city contract, I can assure you, it's not, I said, cutting her off. I held up a single folded piece of paper. The default notice from BA Holdings. It's about this, your 8-figure balloon payment. It's due tomorrow. EOD. Her confusion deepened. I don't understand. That's with Hudson Capital. We're in negotiations. No, I said, my voice quiet, but it cut through the lobby's buzz. You're not. Hudson Capital sold your note 30 days ago. They sold it to me. I let that sink in. I watched the color drain from her face. The blood drained, leaving a blotchy, pale mask of shock. She knew. She didn't know how, but she knew. "My office," she whispered, turning on her heel. We walked in. She shut the door. The soundproof glass silenced the celebrating agents outside. It was just us. "Who are you?" she hissed. "What is this? Some kind of hostile tactic? You lost the contract, so now you're trying to—" "Oh, stop," I said. I was so tired of the acting. "Stop the performance, Camilla. I'm not Gregory. I'm not the city council. I'm the woman your lover lied to for 19 years. She froze. Every bit of manufactured confidence, every ounce of shark-like aggression, just evaporated. She was just a woman in a red dress, staring at a ghost. "I found the storage unit, dear," I said, walking past her to look out the window at the city, my city. 31B. Tacky. He always did have tacky taste in secrets. "I found the pictures, the fake invoices, the joint bank account. I found the birth certificate for Leo." She made a small, strangled sound. "He was brilliant, I'll give him that." I continued. "He built you a company with my money. He set you up as his own, private, perfect competition. He was going to hand you his entire kingdom, wasn't he? Let his legitimate son fail, and let his bastard son inherit the earth. It was a beautiful plan. You don't know," she stammered, grabbing her desk. "I know," I said, turning to face her. "That your entire empire, this office, your agents, your precious contract, your son's college fund, was all built on a loan that I now own, and you are in default. As of tomorrow at 5 p.m., I will own this building. I will own your home. I will own every asset tied to Rojas Realty. I will gut you, just like you and Arthur planned to gut my son." "Please," she whispered. The shark was gone. Now it was just blood in the water. "Please don't. The contract. I can pay you. We can work something out." "Yes, we can," I said. I sat down in her expensive leather client chair. I crossed my legs. "You're right. I don't want your company. It's a house of cards, built on lies. It's tainted. I don't want the hassle of foreclosure. I want a clean break." I reached into my purse and pulled out a stack of documents Thorne had prepared. I slid them onto her desk. "This is a full and total asset transfer. You are going to sign over every corporate account, every property title, and the keys to your little black Mercedes to BA Holdings. You will dissolve Rojas Realty, effective immediately. You will sign this non-disclosure agreement that forbids you from ever speaking the name Pennington again. You will take your son and you will disappear. This is everything." She shrieked. "You're taking everything.